To begin, welcome to this video where we cut through the noise of the rent versus buy debate and focus on what truly matters: affordability. We will explore why the percentage of your net income going to housing can make or break your financial future, how shared living can unlock major savings, the financial mandates you should complete before buying, and how to stay flexible without sacrificing long-term wealth. Stay with me as we move step by step, and by the end you will have a clear action plan tailored for real-world constraints. Next, here is our roadmap. First, we reframe housing decisions through the lens of affordability. Second, we define the 25% net income rule. Third, we show why shared living can be a powerful economic engine. Fourth, we lay out financial mandates to complete before buying a home. Fifth, we walk through a decision framework with diagrams. Sixth, we test your understanding with a quick quiz. Finally, we close with an actionable plan and a concise recap. Before we dive deeper, a quick but important disclaimer. This video is educational and informational in nature, not financial, legal, or tax advice. Your circumstances, location, taxes, and risk tolerance can materially change the right decision for you. Always consult a qualified professional before making major financial commitments. With that said, let us continue. Moving on, let's establish the core principle: affordability over identity. It does not matter whether the payment is rent or a mortgage. If your housing cost consumes more than 25% of your net monthly income, you are probably sacrificing long-term wealth. The label of renter or owner is secondary to the math of cash flow and savings capacity. Now let's quantify the guardrail. A simple rule of thumb is to keep housing at or below 25% of your net monthly income. For illustration only, consider an $80,000 annual salary. Depending on taxes and benefits, monthly take-home could be around $4,800. Under the 25% rule, that suggests a housing target near $1,200. If you are paying $1,700 to $2,600, then you may be allocating 35 to over 50% of your take-home to housing. That level of spending is a severe constraint that crowds out investing, emergency funds, and other high-leverage financial goals. The exact numbers will vary, but the directional takeaway remains consistent. The more you compress housing costs, the more powerfully you accelerate wealth. Furthermore, compare renting and buying on the variables that matter. Renting offers flexibility and minimal maintenance responsibilities. You avoid property taxes and major repair surprises, though you do not build equity and rents can rise. Buying can build equity if held long enough, and if markets cooperate, yet it demands high upfront cash for a down payment and closing costs. It also requires ongoing maintenance, property taxes, and insurance that typically exceed new owners' expectations. The choice hinges on time horizon, cash reserves, and mobility needs more than the desire to own. Next, let's address the controversial yet effective lever: shared living. By splitting rent, utilities, and internet, you can often cut housing costs by a third to a half. The key is to immediately redirect the freed cash toward investing and reserves. This strategy delays lifestyle inflation and buys you time to build capital, which is the lifeblood of future choices. The goal is not deprivation for its own sake, but strategic compression of living costs to accelerate wealth building. Now consider the compounding effect. Suppose shared living frees $1,000 per month, and you invest at an assumed 7% annual return. Over 5 years, monthly contributions could accumulate to roughly $71,000. Over 10 years, that could grow to approximately $172,000. These figures are estimates, and markets are variable, but they illustrate that small monthly decisions, sustained over time, can compound into large future options. This is why cutting housing costs and investing the gap is so powerful. Meanwhile, here are the mandates to complete before considering homeownership. First, maximize retirement by contributing 15% of gross pay. Early compounding is irreplaceable. Second, build reserves for the purchase itself, including a 20% down payment and roughly 3% in closing costs. Third, plan for ongoing ownership costs by budgeting 1 to 3% of the home's value annually for maintenance, property taxes, and insurance. Fourth, value flexibility. If you anticipate a move or career change within 5 to 7 years, renting typically preserves mobility and reduces the risk of forced selling costs. To visualize the decision, This flowchart begins with assessing your net income and the percentage allocated to housing. If the percentage exceeds 25%, the chart directs you toward shared living to reduce costs, then toward investing the savings by prioritizing retirement contributions and building reserves. If housing is within the 25% threshold, the next checkpoint is whether you have sufficient cash for a down payment of 20%, plus approximately 3% for closing costs, and at least 6 months of expenses. If you do not, the chart advises continued renting while saving. If you do, the next decision is time horizon. If it is less than 7 years, renting is recommended for flexibility. If it is 7 years or longer, the chart moves to consider buying with full reserves. Notes on the chart remind you to account for ongoing ownership costs of 1 to 3% per year and selling costs of 7 to 10%. In addition, this checklist translates the mandates into numbers. For a $350,000 example, a 20% down payment is $70,000. Closing costs at approximately 3% are around $10,500. A separate emergency fund representing 6 months of living expenses provides resilience. If monthly spending is $3,000, that totals about $18,000. Annual maintenance typically ranges from 1 to 3% of the home's value, implying $3,500 to $10,500 per year. Insurance and property taxes vary widely by location, so budgeting conservatively is prudent. These figures are illustrative and should be tailored to your market and risk profile. Continuing with a practical roadmap, here is a 5-year plan in plain steps. In year 1, move to shared housing if needed, and cap housing at or below 25% of net income. In years 1 and 2, increase retirement contributions to 15% of gross pay and automate them. Between years 1 and 3, accumulate funds for a 20% down payment and approximately 3% closing costs while maintaining a separate 6-month emergency fund. Through years 2 to 5, invest any additional surplus and begin budgeting for future ownership costs at 1 to 3% per year. In years 4 and 5, if your career and location appear stable for at least the next 7 years, carefully evaluate purchasing. Automating transfers and separating down payment savings in a dedicated account can help you stay consistent. Now let's test your understanding. If your housing consumes 40% of your net monthly income, what is the most effective first move to accelerate wealth building? Is it A, buy a home now to build equity, B, keep renting the same place and cut discretionary spending only, C, shift to shared living to halve housing costs and invest the difference, or D, wait for interest rates to drop before doing anything? You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is C. When housing is at 40% of net income, the most powerful lever is to reduce housing costs rapidly, and shared living is often the fastest route. This action frees substantial cash flow for investing and reserve building. Waiting passively for rate changes, or buying without sufficient reserves, introduces risk without addressing the core affordability constraint. To illustrate the path over time, this timeline starts with a high housing burden today. In the first 1 to 3 months, it shows the transition to shared living and the automation of retirement contributions at 15%. Over months 4 to 24, it highlights building the down payment, closing costs, and a 6-month emergency fund. During years 3 through 5, it emphasizes maintaining housing at or below 25% of net income and investing any surplus. After year 5, if your situation appears stable for at least 7 years, the timeline indicates it is reasonable to evaluate buying with full reserves. This staged approach prioritizes liquidity and resilience before ownership. As a result, the key points are straightforward. First, lead with affordability by keeping housing at or below 25% of net income. Second, recognize that shared living can unlock thousands of dollars per year that should be redirected toward investing. Third, complete the mandates before buying. 15% to retirement, a 20% down payment, roughly 3% for closing costs, and 1 to 3% annually for maintenance and related ownership expenses. Fourth, if your time horizon is under 7 years, renting typically preserves mobility and lowers risk. Finally, avoid buying simply because you qualify for a loan. Buy only when your reserves and retirement contributions are firmly in place. In conclusion, the rent versus buy label is secondary to keeping housing affordable. Shared living is a practical way to accelerate savings and compounding. Follow the financial mandates, and then decide whether to rent or buy based on your time horizon, reserves, and flexibility needs. This approach increases the odds of building durable wealth while minimizing avoidable risks. Before we go, if this video helped you clarify your next steps, please like the video, share it with a friend who is wrestling with the same decision, and subscribe for more smart money content. I would also love to hear your housing strategy and city in the comments. Your insights can help others make better decisions too.